Well, first of all, my name is Ed Whitfield from the state of Kentucky, and I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. We do expect various people will be coming and going through this process. And before I even get started on this, even though we hope that everyone will have a few minutes to speak, I want every member to simply give their name and the state that they're from so that you, in the beginning, will know who all is here. So, Cynthia, why don't we start with you?
I'm Cynthia Lemons from Wyoming, which since 1986 has been the largest coal-producing state in the nation.
I'm Kevin Kramer from North Dakota.
Steve Daines from Montana.
Brett Guthrie from Kentucky.
Bill Johnson from the heart of the coal region in eastern Ohio.
Jackie Walorski, State of Indiana.
Nick Rahall, State of West Virginia.
Greg Harper, Mississippi.
Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia.
Andy Barr, Kentucky.
Larry Bouchon, every coal mine in the state of Indiana is in my district.
Go ahead.
Ann Wagner, State of Missouri. We consume 80% of our electricity is coal-based.
Joe Barton from the small state of Texas.
Thomas Massey from Kentucky.
And Corey Gardner, Colorado.
Okay.
Hey, sorry, Rodney Davis, Illinois.
Well, I want to thank all of you once again for joining us. As I said, we expect other people to come, but we call this press conference today because today we began our efforts to stop this proposed regulation by EPA to control CO2 emissions, and as you know, it was directed by the President of the United States that they do so by September the 20th, which was just a few days ago. So this proposed regulation, as you probably know by now, would mean that America would be the only country in the world where you could not build a new coal-powered plant to produce electricity. Now, I'd like to remind all of you that CO2 emissions worldwide, 3.75% of that CO2 comes from man-made activities. And I might remind every one of you that today our CO2 emissions in the United States are the lowest that they've been in 20 years. Now, this comes at a rather inopportune time because, as you know, over the last 4 years, our unemployment rate in each of the last 4 years has been higher than in any time the last 60 years except for 3 years. So we're still struggling with trying to create economic growth and create jobs and remain competitive in the global marketplace. This regulation, as I said, would make it impossible to build a new coal-powered plant. And EPA has set a standard based on 4 plants, 3 of which have not even been built. None of them have been open, and so it's totally speculation. And these plants that I'm referring to, one in Mississippi, one in Texas, one in California, and one in Canada, none of them would have been built without a $1.4 billion federal tax grant and tax credits. So this is nothing but pure speculation, and we're committing ourselves today, Democrats and Republicans, to introduce legislation that would stop this regulation. It was never the intent of Congress that CO2 emissions would be regulated under the Clean Air Act. And so that's why we're here today. And at this time, it's my pleasure, I'd like to introduce our Republican leader in the United States Senate, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, for his remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Ed, and my colleague Rand Paul, and all of my colleagues here in the House and Senate. We've got a depression in eastern Kentucky. That's with a D, depression, created by this administration. We've lost over 5,000 coal mining jobs since Barack Obama took office. The EPA is in the process of trying to pass a regulation, as Congressman Whitfield was talking about, to guarantee there's never a coal-fired plant built again in America. This needs to be stopped. We're going to go after them in every way we can possibly can. The Congressional Review Act, every possible way to block this outrageous assault on coal that produces about 40% of our electricity in this country. In our state, I'll conclude by saying in our state, a war on coal is not just a war on eastern Kentucky. It's a war on the whole state, because what's made us competitive for industry is low utility rates. Some years we've had the lowest utility rates in the country. We've always been among the 5 lowest in the country. That's how we get jobs and opportunity for everybody in Kentucky. It's a disaster, and I'm sure everybody behind me here, regardless of party, will be unified in trying to stop these people from ruining certainly my state and maybe other states that are behind us. Thanks so much, Ed.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Hal Rogers of Kentucky.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for putting this together. I want to echo what the Minority Leader of the Senate has said. These regulations are killing jobs. They're killing America's competitiveness around the world. And they don't realize, I don't believe, just how much this country is depending on coal for its energy basis. Because it is. Coal truly keeps the lights on. And I don't think the administration understands that. And so that's why you see this massive support for this bill to keep the strangulation by regulation that's taking place now from taking place in the future. So thank you, Ed, for all you and your cohort's work on making this bill a go, and we're definitely supporting it. Coal keeps the lights on.
Thank you, Hal. At this time, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky.
Thanks, Ed. You know, a war on coal really is a war on jobs. What I hear everywhere I go is people want good paying manufacturing jobs in our country. These are good paying manufacturing jobs, and we've lost 4,000 jobs in the last year. Now, if you say, I just want to drive my electric car, well, you plug your electric car in, we're burning coal to give you the electricity. Nearly half the electricity in our country comes from coal, and if you don't have coal, you're not going to have electricity. The other issue here really is who writes the law in our country? Does the legislature write the law, or does the president get to do it by fiat? This is an important distinction. When we separated powers, Montesquieu said if you let the executive legislate, there'll be a type of a tyranny. This is a type of a tyranny. We will fight it, not just because it's bad for jobs and bad for coal, but because it goes against everything we stand for. We write the laws, the president doesn't get to, and we're going to fight him as long as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paul. At this time, I'd like to recognize the former chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Joe Barton.
Thank you. Well, before I make my comments on this issue, let me say, as I look at the minority leader from the Senate, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the House, the subcommittee chairman of the Energy and Power Committee in the House, Texas loves Kentucky. I just want y'all to know that. What this is about is energy choice and the cost of electricity for consumers in America. When the EPA last week put out these new regulations for coal, they basically said that a coal plant's got to meet the same emission standards as a natural gas-fired power plant, which means coal plants have to cut their emissions in half. That's not possible without raising the cost of that coal plant by about a factor of 2. So you're just not going to build coal plants. So you're not going to use coal as an energy source, even though it's the most abundant energy source we have in America. So this is really, it's really not a war against coal. It's a war against the American consumer and the right to choose what's the best source of electricity for our folks here in the United States. So I hope that with all the power that we have here, that we are able to in some way either convince the EPA to rescind these rules, or perhaps it may be possible legislatively to delay or overturn them. Thank you.
Yeah, and particularly since the technology is not available to meet these standards. Nick Rahall of West Virginia.
Thank you, Ed. As a member of the Democratic Party, I join and associate myself with the comments that have been made by my colleagues across the aisle. When it comes to coal, this should not be a partisan issue. What we're seeing from this administration in its war on coal is putting Americans out of work, is putting our coal miners out of work, whether they are Democrats or Republicans. And it's hurting in the coal fields. Hal Rogers had it right, my neighbor across the line in Kentucky. Coal does literally keep the lights on. In so many counties, it allows for the hiring of law enforcement personnel, and it allows so much more to keep Americans living and progressing in today's economy. These proposed regulations on new coal-fired power plants by the EPA is just the latest salvo in this administration's war on coal. And make no mistake about it, that is what it is. The administration cannot tout an all-of-the-above energy strategy when such proposals target one fossil fuel, coal in particular. That's not an all-of-the-above strategy. Coal is our most abundant, reliable energy resource in this country. At a time when more of our foreign competitors, when foreign countries are turning to coal, it makes no sense to further plague our industry here at home. And let me tell you, these regulations have a chilling effect across our economy, not only on new coal-fired power plants, but existing coal-fired power plants as well. This policy is a dud, it's short-sighted, it's ill-conceived, it's illogical, and I'm proud to join with my colleagues across all political stripes in fighting this war on coal and joining with Ed Whitfield in working so diligently in many pieces of legislation that have passed the House of Representatives that seek to rein in an overzealous, overreaching EPA trying to do what cannot be done legislatively through regulations. It's time to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia.
Thank you, Ed, and I'm pleased to be here also representing the state of West Virginia, where we generate 95% of our electricity is generated by coal. And my colleague from Wyoming, we're the number 2 producer of coal in this country, and it is part of who we are. And basically what this policy has done, and Nick has just described it great for how it's affecting West Virginians, but it's also picking winners and losers. And many of us standing here and many Americans across the country are going to be on the losing end, whether you're a manufacturing job, whether you're a coal mining operation. But let's talk about our senior citizens on fixed incomes. If these regulations go forth, it is going to be impossible for them to cool their homes in the summer and heat them in the winter. And I think we need to look at our more vulnerable population when we consider the effect of these far-reaching regulations. So I am a co-chair of the original co-sponsor too of the Coal Caucus, or many members are here with me today. The other issue I think that that Nick brought out that I think is important, we're exporting our coal in grand numbers, larger numbers than ever. So what we're saying to the world is, with this regulation, is we'll export our coal to you for you to burn without the regulatory environment that we have, but we're going to tie one hand behind the back of American manufacturing and put ourselves in a position where we're not going to be allowed to burn our own coal. So I put a bill in just last week that says these regulations cannot go forward until the rest of the world signs on to any kind of stringent regulations, so at least we would have an even playing field. But the bottom line is we've got to end this war on coal, end these regulations, and come back to more